We got Reverend William Barber, Dr. Barber. He joined a panel of experts to discuss a very important and pressing question. And that is, are we going to continue to send tanks over there to the Ukraine? I mean, are we going to continue to do that? That was the question that Reverend Barber had to answer. So, is Biden right to send tanks to the Ukraine? Our panel reacts. And then so you see all of the panelists right there. And there were various opinions on the answer to this question. But Reverend Barber made it very clear that he believes that we risk a downward spiral of death, moving the conversation in a more poignant direction. He leaned on morality. And the basic moral question, the Reverend said, we must ask is not simply whether it's right to send tanks between two wars and in the middle of a Great Depression. Harry Emerson Fosdick wrote a hymn we need to hear now. Russia needs to hear it. America, Ukraine, Germany, and the whole world needs to stop now, hear, and pray. And some of what was in that hymn. God of grace and God of glory, cure your children's warring madness. Bend our pride to your control. Shame our wanton selfish gladness, rich in things and poor in soul. Now, he went on to further state that he believes what the real question is when it comes to this war. And he says, the real question we must ask is, when are we going to turn from death to life? From all of this warring madness. In a nuclear age, the constant escalation of force can lead to nuclear war that kills us all. I mean, that is it right there. Bold and underline, underscore that message in a bottle on every mode of transportation we got. And the spirit of death and war and madness must be challenged. That is it. And over 1 million people have died in this country. But before I get to that, let's put up one other point that the Reverend made. I cannot help but to think that at a rate of 700 people a day, over 16,000 Americans have died from poverty and the lack of public policy since the beginning of this year. I must remember the victims of mass shootings, out of control police violence, and the hundreds of thousands in America alone who've died during this pandemic, not because they caught COVID, but because they did not have access to health care. So the Reverend definitely moving the discussion back to domestic concerns that a whole bunch of American people share the same concerns that the Reverend is laying down. And over 1 million Americans have died. And as another religious leader, Dr. Jamal Bryant, extolled in a sermon that we lost over 1 million people in deaths due to COVID or linked to COVID in some kind of way. And as a nation, we have not even mourned. And this, one other important point, Dan, and I want to bring you in for your comments, should not be lost on any of us about what Reverend Barber had to say. Let's put up this tweet. In a nuclear age, the constant escalation of force can lead to nuclear war that kills us all. This spirit of death and warring madness must be challenged. In other words, can we and the species that depend on our kind to get it right put everybody in the entire ecosystem at peril, meaning all life gone, for WW3? Dan, your thoughts?
He's got a lot that he's saying that makes a lot of sense. Even when we were just talking there about the way that we haven't really mourned how many losses we had over COVID-19, that is like a societal ill. But I also see within that the fact that, hey, we have the political will. Never mind the money, we'll figure out the money later, but we have the political will to send arms to Ukraine, to train Ukrainian troops, to figure out how to weaponize that conflict more and more and more. But let alone is there no political will to, or like less political will to force as peaceful of a conversation as possible. There's also less political will to handle the domestic situations that we need to be handling here, crumbling infrastructure, people who are going hungry and unhoused here today, right now. So it really, hopefully, Reverend Dr. Barber, his message can help us reassess the way we carry ourselves in America, because it's definitely unhealthy.
Yeah, it is. It's unhealthy for us as individuals, our communities, this nation, and the larger world. And I am with you, Dan. If anybody could help get us there, and I definitely say he cannot do this alone. But if any person could be one of the leaders in the movement to help us understand this as Americans and demand that our leaders flex our power, our collective power differently, that would be the one and only Reverend Dr. William Barber.